Hello everyone, and welcome to another tutorial. So for this one, I thought I've shown you a little bit of how I deal with, building out the forest in my game and the procedural foliage volume that I'm using and some of the settings, along with kind of how the landscape material is using, the landscape grass output to place these grasses along here. And so everything in the scene has been built procedurally, aside from the plane for the water and the spline that has these kind of just these edge meshes going alongside the pond. But everything else is placed procedurally, like I said. So the trees, the rocks, the grasses, all the ferns. Now this is using the Nordic conifer biome pack, which is an awesome pack. It already comes with a really nice looking map, and the setup for the vegetation is already really good. But I'm going to show you how to make a forest using just free assets and just how the process that I'm using. If you decide to buy this package or any other packages, these methods should apply as well. But like I said, I'm going to be just using free assets from the marketplace, and we'll see what we can come up with. But first, let me show you the assets that I'm going to be using. So most of them come from these free assets from Project Nature. So we're going to have some ferns. We're going to have some trees, these spruce trees. We're going to have some flowers going around. And we're going to have a couple of these grasses that are from these packages here. So without further ado, let's get to it. So I'm here in just in a basic level that I've created. I've added a landscape here, and what I'm going to use is something from a previous tutorial that I've made, and that would be, let's take a look where that is. I'm going to just find it here. So this is from the terrain material that is on my channel as well, and I'm going to add that into here, into the landscape material. So there we go. Uh, you want to make sure that before you paint, you have the layers added here. And if you're just creating them from scratch, the way to do it is you're just going to create the layer info right now that I have already created. But for wet sand, I have not added it. So if I was to create one, you would want to create a weight blended layer. At least that's how I did it. And I have an existing one, so I'm not going to go ahead and create it again, and I'm just going to select it right here. So now I can paint along here. So I have a couple of I have like 4 layers here, mainly these 3 that I'm interested in. I'm not so much in the rocky ground because that's just for sloping, but as you can see, there's a couple of kind of foresty looking surfaces that I'm going to be working with. Okay, so let's get to it. First of all, what we need to make sure before we get started is under your edit and editor preferences, under all settings, if you look for procedural foliage, you want to have that checked because that's gonna give a lot more options in your procedural foliage volume. So with that said, let's drag in a procedural foliage volume. So there we go. We have one right there. And this one, whenever you drag it in, it's pretty small. So let's go ahead. I'm going to make this 10 times bigger. Would that be enough? I think that's still too small. Let's make it 100 times bigger. Just like that. That should cover. Whoa, that's a big area, actually. I think I went a little too many zeros. There we go. About 10 times in height. Okay, perfect. So that's our starting point. Now I'm gonna bring this over here and I'm gonna go into my procedural foliage tutorial. Where do I want to keep this? Let's see, I want to keep it right in here. I wanted to do it in a fresh new, I did already some testing around here. So let's create a new folder here. I'm gonna call it V2 just to keep everything in here. So I'm going to right click here and go into foliage. And first of all, I want to create a procedural foliage spawner. And I'm going to call this PFS underscore trees. So this is going to handle all of our trees in the level. And I'm going to be adding it to this guy here. And let's make sure I'm just going to call this, let's rename it to procedural foliage, trees. Okay, so let's open this up. Now, when we look at this, you'll see that we need to add a bunch of foliage types. So for each one of our trees. And to do that, I'm just going to right click again, go into foliage and do static mesh foliage. So this is going to be, I'm going to call this PF underscore. I'm going to start with a large tree. The way I want to have these set up is a large tree, a medium tree, and then a kind of a smaller scale tree. That way you have a nice transition and it's not just like really tall trees and then the ground. Well, you can have that, of course, but that is the kind of what I like to have, you know, these kind of just this transition. So the large tree, I'm just going to open this up. And right off the bat, whenever you create this, uh, the default settings are a great place to start. I usually don't change much when it comes to this. I mostly just focus on like aligning to normal, then the seed density, and the inclusion and exclusion landscape layers because um, what I've noticed, at least in my scenes that I like setting up, is I want to control where the trees are being placed using the landscape material. So wherever I paint, for example, like like a meadow, like a grassy knoll or a grassy meadow, I want that to be grass. I don't want trees to be placed in that area. So that way you can create these kind of like clearing areas where it's only grass. So let's take a look. What I'm going to do is let's create a few trees. So I have the large tree here, and what I want to use, let's take a look at the interactive spruce forest that I have. So for the static mesh, what I'm going to use one of these tall spruce trees. So let's go with what I want to use. Let's try this one. So I'm going to be placing that in here, saving that, and I'm going to be adding it to our procedural foliage simulation here under this foliage object. So right back into our tutorial under V2, we have our large tree, and let's just place it here. Okay, so now we're ready to simulate. Of course, there's not going to be anything exciting because, you know, they're all the same tree for starters. But what we're going to add is some additional trees. And the other thing that I want to add to this is an inclusion landscape layer. So that way it only gets painted on the layer that I want it to be on. So in our case, if we look at this, it's going to be on the mossy ground. So I just want to copy this exact name, mossy ground, and place it right here. So mossy ground. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's resimulate it again. Remember, we've painted some of this terrain over here. I'm just going to actually paint a little more. So let's just kind of paint it around here. This is going to be our kind of grassy areas that I want to. I don't want to spawn any of these trees in. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Just kind of make a little bit of just some islands, I would say, of trees. So let's just kind of paint it around here. We can go back and paint it some more, but I want to see how this is going to turn out. All right, so we have this kind of bigger clearing over here, and now we're ready to simulate it again. So let's select it and resimulate. So there we go. Now we have these open areas that are a little bit better for our needs when it comes to just having some open spaces. And if you'll notice, there's some of those I didn't paint it strongly enough, so let's just try and do it again. I had the brush size a little too small, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, just like that. So I'm going to paint it around here and kind of going around, somewhere around here as well. I'm going to try and make one here in the middle just to have like a group of trees. Okay, let's try and resimulate this. There we go. And now we have some just some of these areas where we have some trees and then kind of the open space. So I think that already is looking quite a bit better. But we want to add some more because, like I said, these are looking just, everything is just this kind of line around here. Doesn't provide a smoother transition to the terrain. So I'm going to duplicate this tree and I'm going to make this into a medium tree and then duplicate it again and make this into a small tree. All right, so let's replace the mesh for the medium tree. This one is kind of a bigger scale mesh. And I'm gonna go with this one. It's got a little bit of a different type of leaf happening here. So I'm gonna use that. And along with that, it's also gonna be spawned on this mossy ground layer. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bring down the scale. So it's gonna be 1 to 2. So we don't go too big with it. And then the next one that we want to have is, let's take a look. We're going to open the small tree. And with that, it's going to be the same. So let's take a look at the small options. And I'm going to try and use this one right there. Okay, let's make sure we add those to our procedural um, foliage spawner. So we got the large tree, we got the medium tree, and then we got the small tree. There we go. All right, let's try and resimulate this. And right off the bat, it already looks quite a lot nicer. There's quite a lot more variety. But what I'm seeing is this tree is kind of this small tree. It is a little bit big. So I'm going to try and see if I can find a different mesh for it. The one thing that you can also do is I can also scale it down. So I'm going to do a maybe 0.5 to 1.5 because I do like the shape of it. So let's see how this one looks. Okay, that's quite a bit better. We have the tall tree, which is this one here, then the medium scale, and I think the medium scale, we can actually scale that down as well. So let's do that. So I'm going to make it 0.75 to 1.5 as well. Let's try this again. Okay, that's quite a bit better. I'm liking that a lot more. All right, but it still looks because there's nothing on the terrain. So let's uh, let's do the another procedural just foliage spawner, but for the rocks and kind of the ground assets that we want to have. You can have everything um, in the same one here with no trouble. But I like to keep them. I like to keep them a little separate. So let's go ahead and I'm just gonna duplicate this. So let's duplicate this, and then I'm gonna call this ground assets. All right, so I'm going to start by removing these because we don't want the trees. But I'm going to start with the small tree, and this is going to be maybe ground asset 1. And let's see what we want to use for this. So I'm thinking for this one in particular, let's use some rocks from that procedural nature pack. So I believe this one does have some rock meshes. So let's see what we can find. Not a lot of variety in this particular one, but I think we can use this a couple of these boulders for our needs. So this is going to be one boulder here, and I'm going to save that. And I'm going to duplicate it. And let's use the second boulder here. They're kind of the same shape. We're just going to play around with the scale so they look a little bit different. You know, it's not going to be too much different, but hopefully a little bit. So for one of them, I'm thinking I'm just going to be deleting the landscape layer inclusion, so it's going to spawn on everywhere. So let's delete this one as well, and we'll see how this one looks. Let's add him to our spawner. So we have them right here. So there is 1 and 2. Okay, so in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. Just hold Alt and drag it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so I can um, see it a little bit better, which one is what. All right, and for this particular one, let's go ahead and use our ground assets. Now, looking at this particular asset, I'm not sure if it's something that happened when I downloaded it or what it is, but it looks like the LOD is not the best working. It's not working out so well for this particular asset. So let's try and fix this real quick for this small tree here. So this one is really easy. You can just navigate to where your tree is and just select another one. So I'm going to select this small 5 and then hopefully this one actually seems to have a slightly better looking LODs to some extent, but then again, let's see which one might work a little bit better. Hmm. None of them really do. I guess that LOD is either too aggressive or is just badly textured. It might be something on my end, so maybe once you download it, you're not going to run into that issue. Okay, well, with that aside, we've placed the ground assets here, so let's go ahead and resimulate this and see how our rocks is going to turn out. Right off the bat, I'm seeing quite a few variety in scale, but they're kind of a lot of them. So I'm going to go in and for one of these ground assets, I'm going to start with this one. Let's turn down the initial seed density to maybe a 0.4, and then this one, let's make this one a, 0.2. And for this one, for at least for one of them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and double the scale, make it a little bit bigger. Let's resimulate again, and that already looks quite a bit better. Just placing some of these rocks around here. All right, let's take a look now at the ground because that one is going to add quite a bit of um, of detail into our scene. So in order to do that, I'm going to select the terrain and show you what that node and how that works. So like I said, this was already built in a previous tutorial that's on my channel. But what they do have is we have this grass output node. So if you right click, there's going to be a landscape grass output. So this is the node that we're looking for. This is this node right here. And what you can do, you can add a couple of layers in here. So I'm going to do a grass 1 and a grass 2. Now, in order for you to make it so that this particular grass type 1 and this particular grass type 2 is shown on the on the right layers, you just need a layer blend node. And this is how I set it up with an alpha blend. And you need to provide the layer name. So basically the layer name of your terrain layer. So in my case, if you remember, we've had the mossy ground, the swamp water, the wet sand. So for this one, where is it? Is it here? No, it's here. So I had the mossy ground and I have the swamp water. So basically our grasses are going to show up on these two layers. Now, in order for you to get any grasses on here, we need to create as one of these grass types. So let's take a look where they are. So they should be set up. Let me see if I can recall where they're at. They're actually right on the foliage. So it's a landscape grass type. So you just create one of these. And let's open this grass type here. So I'm going to drag it in here. And we're going to add a few grass varieties to it. Now let's take a look at what layer these get written to. So in our master terrain, one of them is going to be placed on the mossy ground and one on the swamp water. So I'm going to see about maybe changing the swamp water here to be Let's see. So we have mossy ground and swamp water. So the swamp water, from the way it looks, it's this kind of I definitely don't have the proper name here, but in my case, the swamp water is this mossy area, which could be set up in these clearings. So in this case, for the mossy ground is the one that's in the forest where the trees are going to spawn. So let's take a quick look. So we have the mossy ground. This is the forest. And let's make sure that is going to be grass 1. So in the forest, what I want to see is I want to see some smaller rocks on the ground. I want to see some ferns, and I want to see like a lower density grass, at least for what we're building here. So let's start with the small rocks, and this is going to bring us back to that procedural natural pack. So this one has some smaller rocks around here, I believe. Let's see where they might be. Yeah, we have some of these scatter rocks. So I'm going to use maybe this one. I'm just going to drag it in here. And let's also play around with the scale on this. So maybe 1 to 2. We'll see how big it is in the world. And I'll keep the density, let's do it to 100. We'll see how many of these spawn in the forest. Let's also add a fern. And this one is going to come out of that fern package from the Project Nature library. And it's right here. So we can add a couple of ferns, I would say maybe. Let's try, what do we want to use? Let's try this one. So we'll use this one here, and also let's add some variety in scale, maybe. Add a third one, and this could be maybe a different type of fern. Let's see, what do we want to choose from here? Maybe something that's a little bit smaller and to the ground, I believe. That'd be interesting to have, just to give some variety in scale as well. Let's try this one. There we go. And again, just giving some difference in sizes. The one thing that you want to look at when it comes to these landscape grasses is kind of how far you want this to show. So depending on your needs and how big this asset is, you can bring this down to maybe 2000s, or just to help with performance, and also just to keep it a little bit more manageable. Okay, so now that we saved this, let's take a look at what's happening to our terrain. So there's already some grasses. And looks like the rocks might be a little bit too much at this point. Just gonna go into here and let's adjust that. So we have the landscape type, and which one was the grass, the rocks. Let's bring this down to 20, maybe half of that, or a fifth of that. All right, so that's a little bit better. I'm liking the terrain assets, like the ferns. Let's see, can we make it even better? It's a lot of it is also on the asset selection. Let's see if we can for this particular fern type, if we can actually make it a little bit bigger. See how this is gonna look. I'm just gonna drag this down here so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so that increased the density there. That might be a little bit too big. I think it was fine before. Let's kind of bring it down to maybe 100. There we go. I think that's better. And the fern, this one I think is fine. Let's see, which one was it? This one. Oh, actually, am I using the same one? I guess I am. My bad. So let's give it a different one. There we go. That definitely brings some more variety in here. And I'm gonna bring this down to 100, just to reduce the amount of the bigger ferns. And I think the small fern can be a little bit higher density. There we go. I think I like what's in the forest right now. Now let's do something for the meadows area. And this one I want to have more grasses. So And the one thing that I forgot to add is in the forest, I want to also place a grass asset. So that way it gives a little bit of a better, easier transition to here. If you want to get really particular with things, you can paint like the third layer that you have. In my case, let's see how that would look. So for example, this wet sand, you know, I can paint that alongside the edge of the forest, right? To help with the transition even more. So um, let's take a look at the material. And in here, we'll just add another array element. And we'll call this grass 3. Let's duplicate our grass type 2. So duplicate that and place it in here. And we'll use the same thing. I'm using this parameter here just to control the amount of grass that I have. So let's call this one, what was that other layer called? Wet sand. Again, like I said, they're not perfectly named. So let's go back into our material. Where was it? Right there. So I called it wet sand. And this one needs to be named wet sand. Needs to have the same name. All right, so let's plug that in here. Come on. There we go. Let's go ahead and apply. It's going to be some shaders being compiled. Save that. All right. So let's apply some grasses to this particular type, because right now there's nothing in here. So I'm just going to do this one. I'm actually going to do just grass. So I'm going to be using the, again, going back in here and under our uh, PN grass library. Let's see if it's in here. Yeah, this is where we're looking at. So let's see. There's quite a lot of types of grasses here, and I'm probably going to try and use something pretty short for that forest edge. And let's see. There's a lot of low grass, so I'm going to try going with this one. So let's see. This one's going to be one of them, and low grass. And again, just let's make sure that we have some variety in scales. And then another one. Let's see, what do we want to use? Just to give some variety, what do we want to go with? Let's try this one. Let's place that in there, and then just again with the same 0.75 to 1.5, maybe make this a little bit taller. And there we go. So now we have this transition grass in between the forest and the meadow area. This one seems a little bit big. I'm not sure why it's labeled as a low grass, but let's adjust that a little here real quick. So let's do 0.3 to maybe 1. See how that's gonna look. I'm just gonna drag it here so we can see what's going on. There we go. That's already quite a bit better. All right, and I think to help even more with the transition, in our in the asset that's in the forest, let's see again which one that is. So for the mossy ground is grass 1. Let's go ahead and grab grass 1. I'm just going to drag both of the grass assets here. All right, so which one did we say we wanted to look at? For the ground grass 1, and actually, that's sorry, that's ground asset. I have it's getting a little late for me here, so my apologies. And what did we say we have? It is grass 1. Okay, so let's see which one is grass 1. I guess we can just open it through here. There we go. There it is. Okay, so in here, I'm just going to add another element, and this one's going to be one of our grasses that we used. Let's just place it our index 3. And as you can see, there's already starting to show up in the forest, but I want to have quite a lot lower density. So there you go, they show up right there. And I'm going to go with a smaller size, zero 0.3 to 1 maybe. We'll just keep it at that. Okay, so now we have a pretty interesting transition happening between our forest area, and now we want to place the grass along this layer here. So we painted this with swamp water. And let's do that again just to make sure. Yeah, that is swamp water. And that is grass 2. So let's do the grass 2. Let's open this up real quick. So right now on the grass 2, there's nothing. So we're going to add some of the ones that we've used already and maybe some flowers as well. So let's start with 3 of them for now. And along with those, what I forgot to add is just some rocks. We have some of those little small rocks in the forest, but I want to add something along alongside the edging and kind of going into the meadow area. But first, let's add the grasses. So I'm going to start with, let's do the slow grass, and I'm going to do the same thing, kind of starting at 0.5 to 1. I think that's fine. Then the second one, it's going to be, which one do I want to use? Let's use this one here. And this one I can be from a zero 0.8 to a 1.6 to have some variety in scale as well. And let's see, I'm just going to bring this in here. And I want to use something that's kind of like the one with the flowers at the top. So let's try this one. For number 3, we'll add that in. So that's already looking quite a bit nicer, having all these uh, this shape at the top of the grass. So it's not just no variety in it. And I'm going to change the size, so 0.75 to 1.5. And for fourth, let's just add the flowers. So this one, let's see, I believe there was like a little flower here, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not in this one. There's so many assets, it takes some time to load. Let's see, where was that? Could it be with the procedural nature pack? Let's see, where did I see that? Let me do a quick search. Maybe in this grass library. Yeah, there's, no, I think we looked at that already. Open world foliage, maybe under the open world foliage. Yeah, there we go. We have some flowers here. So I'm going to try and use this one, this white flower. That should give us some pretty nice contrast. Okay, there we go. So now we have a nice meadow looking area, which is great. I can play around with um, with the scaling for this. This one I haven't done anything to it. So let's do maybe a 0.5 to 1. So that's a nice scaling for that. Did I do the same thing? Yes, I did. Maybe help it even more. With that, there it is. Okay, so that is starting to look pretty damn good. I'm pretty happy with that result. Like I said, the one thing that you can also add to the meadow is some of those smaller rocks that we had in the forest. And let me see if I can find those real quick. Where did I add them? Rocks, grass types 3. Could it be here? Maybe not. All right, let's make sure that I'm having the right layer, which is grass 1, and we'll just add it to the grass type 1. Oh, that's actually the forest. Yep, this is the one that I'm looking for. All right, so we want to place it on the swamp water, I believe, which is grass 2. So let's add one more array here, and one more array element. And there it goes, 0.5 to 1. Let's see how that scale looks. And you'll see there's quite a lot of little rocks around our meadow field. Okay, so that's already a great point for everything procedurally generated. Now, it does look, it still looks a little flat, and that's why sometimes when it comes to the terrain, even in the scene that I've shown in this photo here, it looks a little flat. This was just a test area that I had. So let's give it a little bit more of a verticality kind of shape to it. And the easiest way to do that is, from what I found, is with the ramp tool. So I'm gonna add a ramp starting from here, maybe going to, let's kind of zoom out here a little bit, going to here, and just lift this up in the air like that. Gonna give it a bigger width, and let's add the ramp. All right, and let's also do one going this way, add a ramp, and then maybe one going from here to, actually, nope, let's do it again, from here to here, add a ramp. So there we go. Just by adding those ramps in, you've added quite a bit of detail in here. So we can probably add another one going from here to here. Let's see how that would look. That's a little bit too aggressive on this section there. Let's try and set it up again from here to here. There we go. So that actually turned out as quite a good result. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. And like I said, just to help with performance for your landscape grasses, is just turning down this cull distance. So maybe to something around maybe 2000s. Again, this depends on the scale of it. So let's do that, for example, with the rocks. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time once for everything else to regenerate. But see, like all the way back here, you probably only want to have the taller grasses being shown, and that should make it look pretty good. Okay, well, so with that said, that was pretty much it as far as what I wanted to show you when it comes to just making everything procedurally generated. And like I said, there's a little bit of work, and that can be avoided if you have a splat map for the terrain. But like I said, having the the um, the trees being placed on a particular layer that you paint deliberately, I think definitely helps with how these are going to turn out. So thank you so much for checking this out. Hopefully it was helpful for you. And again, this is just my method. It could be there's probably a ton of other methods out there. But yeah, this is how I do it. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Thank you so much for checking it out, and have a great one.